Okay, thank you all for joining. Um, we just talked a little bit about the ISSS upcoming conference. We'll kind of stay posted on that, see if there's any sessions that look exciting or anything that we can help with for SIGs, maybe anything we can submit to, depending on format or anything like that. Um, as for today, we can look at the ongoing projects and or just truly anything that we want to begin with here. So, does anyone or Randall, if you haven't been here in a few weeks, if you have any just where where have things been taking you or what's going on?
Yeah, so I'm working on with a group out of Nkosi, working on a program for their international symposium uh, in July, and that's a tutorial on AI agent and kind of semantic computing, um, where it intersects bio-inspired design. So it's a little bit of a sort of an edgy thing, but one of the themes that has sort of been popping up relative to uh, sort of semantic computing is, and I'm not sure like how strong the link is here, but um, there's been some discussions around active inference, um, and kind of some curiosity around uh, where those where there may be some tools that are existing or emerging for developing AI agents, um, and also I think more particularly working with big data. So anyway, that's kind of an ongoing development. We're, it'll be a day-long tutorial, and just kind of getting organized for that. And it's targeted for systems engineers. So we're trying to develop. We are developing. We have some case studies, um, and just kind of connecting a few dots there. I don't know if that makes sense, but
Case studies of what?
well, bio-inspired design in systems engineering. Learning um, more specifically, kind of looking at ecological patterns and examining how those transferred into engineering, for to help meet aspirational goals, like social values, helping to realize social values. So it's, like I said, it's a little bit of an edgy topic area, and folding in some work on value sensitive design. So that's sort of a methodology um, that that I think can be utilized for developing AI agents that recognize social values. But it is certainly an ongoing conversation and very much kind of an emerging area of study. So anyway, we're looking for use cases and that where we may be able to test out the tool and evaluate it from different perspectives.
Cool. Um, Peter or Dave or George, any like thoughts on this? Or I mean, Randall, is there any direction to take this that is interesting?
Well, yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was wondering what use cases you're looking for.
Well, a couple have come up in various conversations with firms that are in the engineering space. One is in the area of site remediation, where you may have some toxic waste or whatever, and looking at using an AI agent to maybe develop a strategy. Another one would be, say, ecological disaster management. So say a wildfire or something like that. These create unique conditions, and there's a need to improve kind of the, how do you say, maybe response infrastructure to, yeah, and that's where, there may be situations occurring in natural systems that can inform the development of tools and techniques for for engineering a response, or design artifacts or strategies and so on. So those are two that that have kind of popped up. There's probably a number of others potentially. Thinking like autonomous vehicles, improving performance, developing strategies for, for engineering those kinds of systems, autonomous systems. Yeah, so yeah, we're kind of just getting started with this, and that's kind of the point of the tutorial, is to simultaneously instruct, provide some instruction on kind of the basic, underlying technology behind AI agents, and some of the problem spaces that bio-inspired design could potentially address. And then, have some, develop some discussions on specific use cases, and maybe, try out the tool to help evaluate it, and further develop toolkits. I think the general thought is that right now there's some interesting capabilities through large language models, but there's, they're kind of generic, and where you have some maybe very specific kinds of data available, that might not be integrated into those in those generic tools. You might want to fine tune the models or develop some other connectivity with other tools to enable the design thinking in a more substantive manner. Yeah. So did that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I guess maybe a more generic would answer would be tools like this, I think, could be useful where our existing design capabilities or capacity is stretched, and where there may be some potential for interdisciplinary design efforts.
Cool. I mean, just on the research and ontology side, I think being on the side of or just trailing behind and then cross-indexing whatever does occur in terms of the systems tuple from George's book, currently in development. So kind of just whatever systems ontologies are being used formally or informally on the actual edge of the work, just curate it and in one way pull it into the systems ontology. On another side, assert relationships with the active inference ontology. Then whether we have a full formal in principle relationship between the George's systems tuple and the active inference ontology, which eventually we will have, we get a multi-ontology systems, a cognitive systems parallax on whatever is happening on the edge.
Mm-hmm.
And so then first, that kind of cognitive systems analysis can be on the side behind. And then we can show here's like the improvement in accessibility and in rigor and applicability based upon just trailing and taking notes with these frameworks. And
Mm-hmm.
then what would happen if the group in the actual work on the edge was proactively using this in counterfactual spaces and parameter sweeps and like real-time, the cognitive digital twins and things like that. And so that second step is more aspirational and further away and more technological and is really right now only accessible to organizations with a very strong commitment to model-based systems engineering.
Mm-hmm.
Note-taking and the ontology cross-referencing is available to everyone already. And I think the kind of excitingness and shininess of the aspirational goal acts as like a sublimator or an attractor for these
Mm-hmm.
very proximate things that get us on that path very rapidly. And so
Mm-hmm.
both in mind that there's like systems and biomimicry and patterns and all these things that we can start using immediately without asking anyone to change anything that they're doing, especially if there's just someone else in the group.
Right.
And clarifying that we're not banking on a future technique, though pointing at it. Because what is important and what can be done just at the way things are.
Right.
Otherwise, it's very like alternative futures, which I think is exciting. However, it delays what is actually possible and proximate when it's framed in a sci-fi or a kind of like hyper penetrated, like total understanding, when the spirit along the way is much more about like the messy and the iterating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the general idea is to try to accelerate these cognitive processes, and you know, develop options that might not otherwise be readily developed. primarily because of the gap between disciplines, right? So, your traditional engineer is not going to be deeply trained in biology, but there's a huge corpus of biological information out there where some kind of an AI tool might be able to help bridge that gap. Yeah, and I think developing the capability to rapidly sort of introspect on that discourse stream and improve the tools, could, I think could help to realize that broader acceleration in technological innovation. So yeah, we're at this time we're looking for small groups of folks who might be able to contribute to this work stream with the aim of presenting, developing a tutorial which is going to be presented in Dublin, probably going to be a day-long thing, and that's going to be early July at the INCOSE International Symposium. I think alongside that, we'd like to develop sort of some additional collateral. This is trying to level up skill sets. Where say systems engineers may not have a deep familiarity with some of the foundational concepts underlying the AI agents and the tools and databases that are out there, so that when we bring these into a project workspace, they can kind of not necessarily create their own, but responsibly work with the tools that are there. Yeah, and I think where another area where it can be a little challenging is, besides the sort of the biological knowledge, sort of where these systems or potential toolkits maybe interface with social systems or social values. So there may be sort of ethical considerations, and again, that's not necessarily the forte of your dyed-in-the-wool engineer, but again, these tools can help to bridge those gaps and foster cross-disciplinary discussions. So yeah, there's a lot going on there.
Yeah, that makes me wonder if an appropriately parameterized value distribution, like using P3AF or any other value-based design framework, if we have a value and we have a rubric to parameterize or evaluate it, so not making map territory fallacies, not just happiness is a value. Just for this example, we have 10 rubric, question out of 10, how many true or false questions? So it's like map territory. We're not saying happiness is a 10 question checklist, but that's our measurement here. So we have a distribution on 1 to 10. And then, so now that it has been appropriately constrained into a measurement space, as to that distribution, with expected free energy in active inference, we can talk about the pragmatic value aligning the happiness like we expect it to be, and the epistemic value with learning. And then I think a question will be, is anything further needed about that distribution? Like if we had a systems model and there was the pH of the water, the temperature in the room, and the happiness of the person. So if 3 distributions, and we're making a joint model of those 3 factorized distributions, does there need to be subsequent handling of so-called value cognitive distributions, or once it's been brought into the measurement space, the fact that one of them is a Fahrenheit on a thermometer and another one is a rubric on a multiple choice test, have, by bringing it into a modeling framework, have we left the territory at the door?
Mhm.
And therefore, and then someone says, oh, but no, but not this direction here on the happiness parameter. And it's like, but that's keeping one foot on the territory. So so that's the tension with the map and the territory, is after bringing things into a cognitive mapping space, will there be any need to continually bring other implicit or extra information in? And then after somebody brings that information in, we make it explicit. Now, can we continue in that space? Or again, does there need to be this kind of open-endedness because the values, or just more generally the properties, are in a continuum with other cognitive and physical traits of
Mhm.
systems? And so the difference between like many sensors estimating the temperature on the water tank and then many people's evaluation on whether like this article represents dignity,
Right.
do those in principle need to be differentiated? Because there's
Yeah.
also a layer of understanding and using the model that isn't necessarily escapable.
Yeah. So yeah, and I think this is, you're kind of speaking to this concept of value sensitive design, where uh, identified values are correlated with social norms, and those are correlated with, say, system design requirements. Um, and so I think there's a gap, there's sort of a research gap there to be filled, um, to bring some rigor to that, and also uh, integrate it into the toolkit, or a toolkit, or a set of toolkits. Yeah, so multiple activities there. One is kind of looking at augmenting existing tools with say appropriate data streams for domain, specific domain uses. The second one would be kind of bridging the gap, sort of knowledge gaps um, between, say, core engineering skill sets and uh, biological, ecological knowledge sets. And a third one, social knowledge sets, social behavioral modeling, social outcome modeling, things of that nature. And then let's see, wrapping all that into like a toolkit, or a set of discussions to help inform the systems engineering process.
So are you actually developing this tool before Dublin, or is this conversation or the day-long session in Dublin a sort of design workshop about how this might work?
The tool exists, and we're just starting some, I almost want to say, pre-beta testing, making some inquiries with people who sort of understand the bio-inspired design space, and then from there, kind of build a set of use cases that we can use to make it sort of a richer tool set for wider use.
Is this something that's going to be, is it a commercial product or is it going to be open space? I mean, open source? Or what's
Currently,
the
it's open
potential?
source. Yeah. Yeah. So it's actually a lot of it can already be done with prompt engineering.
Mhm.
It's just not, I think it's not well sort of theorized yet. And I was saying before, this is to kind of, I think, level up the sort of the capacity for interdisciplinary activity through, with the, maybe using, using this such a toolkit as sort of an interface.
Sure. No, I mean, the reason I'm interested is because I'm doing some work in the American Society of Cybernetics and beyond, actually, on how to bring forth archival material. And obviously in the realm of cybernetics, which you were just talking about before the meeting began with the conference in the summer, there's a couple of themes that relate to what you're doing here. And of course, the conference comes before the INCOSY workshop, but the archiving theme, it relates to how do you bring forth knowledge that exists and make it applicable in new ways. And to some extent, that's what you're doing with this tool that you are describing. And
Yes.
the other part of it is also part of that meeting is relating to how languaging affects the cognitive, behavioral, our life experience. And so, in the realm of cybernetics, Gordon Pask did quite a lot of work on conversation theory, and we've been talking about interfaces to material to make it applicable and relevant, and in bringing it forth in different disciplines. For example, how can cybernetics help in the realm of international relations and peace studies, for example?
Mhm. Yes,
And
actually, so if I could just jump in here just for a second, I think, that kind of discourse analysis, stream of thought, it could be very valuable, and because we're already kind of coming up against that in sort of the responses we've been getting from various people who've tested out this tool. I mean, in just very preliminary ways. So I think that that could be something to explore more deeply, to bring sort of some cybernetic rigor to to this activity.
yeah, I'd happy to talk to you, after the meeting or on that in more detail.
Okay. Yeah,
Cool.
I'll follow
Also,
up with you.
Dave has worked a lot long before my birth, and also with me on the discourse analysis, especially like of and with and about the active inference ontology, and
Mhm.
really just the diligent note post analysis with the annotation of stream of thought. Like, I find that on technical topics, almost no recorded conversations or natural speech expressions will go beyond the technical knowledge that almost any language model already has. So people just do not emit those kinds of expressions. And yet the conversation can be immensely augmented. But like in the active inference journal with Dave's work and all the transcripts and all of this, like although the speech recognition quality of the word in the token scale has improved a lot over the years, the speaker identification is still one of the most key parts, which is why still all these transcripts are just getting plopped in like bag of words when we need to have a plurality of approaches ranging from like the most classically syntactic, like grammar tree type approaches, all the way up through the pure statistical syntax analyses. And I mean, just all these different methods and understanding like how and where to use different things and where we stand in practice at a moment, and then where we stand in principle, because things like context windows and prompts, like the ground is shifting so fast with what is possible that now that there's models with 1 million token plus context windows, prompt engineering isn't exactly how it used to be, because
Yeah.
you don't need to load it into the context window anymore when you have a model with a radically different architecture. But that still is just like more and bigger of the same. And to complement that, like the big statistical analysis with the fine scale sumo or actim for linguistic analysis is going to reveal some amazing new patterns. What do you think, Dave?
Yeah.
And also, Peter, I mean, David, I mean, the cybernetics angle. I mean,
Yeah, I
Yeah.
was a student of Gordon Pask in the 70s. I'm actually working on the code of cast and extend to get it running and get it
Oh,
as a
really?
front end of some suitable
Oh,
database.
yeah.
And
Well, I mean, Paul Pangaro and I've been talking about. Have you been talking to Paul?
yeah. Well, I'm in Pittsburgh temporarily. I usually live outside the US, but I'm here for another few months for a
Oh.
wedding. Yeah, I would assume he's going to the ASC meeting in June.
Oh, yeah. But I mean, we've been
But I
talking
see him
about that.
now and then. The
Yeah.
reason that there is a scannable version of the 4 great big books of Gordon Pask is because I scanned them and ran them to OCR. And
Really?
those,
Okay.
Paul has those in his archive. And yeah, he's got so much stuff in his archive, and it's not adequately indexed, and it's not cross-referenced with the Pask archive in Europe or the von Förster archive, and we don't have runtime German to English translations, and we should.
Yeah. All of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. Well, if you're up in Pittsburgh for the next couple of months, I was talking about going and seeing Paul, in the next month or so. So maybe we could arrange a time to meet, because I think some of these topics are central to what we're talking about.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I've also been looking at the Spatial Web Foundation
Yeah.
initiative to formalize a language or a pair of languages, an expressive language and a framework for addressing more the communication layer. They're doing a lot of details in some areas, but they don't seem to have done much on extending languages of interrogation and command. I need to be able to ask you questions. I need to be able to say, hey, I have information. Would you be willing to accept that? I should be able to establish what are the contractual relations between you and me that already exist by virtue of us holding particular certificates. We need to be able to create contracts on the fly, whereby I say, you and I are the most capable drones in this airspace right now. We have to coordinate this. There are amateur drones that can accept commands so we don't get shot down. And you and I have to coordinate. Are you talking to the military? I'm talking to civilian air. These are my certificates. Now you're in a position to give me commands on certain things. I wish to be in a position to give you commands on certain things. Shall we instantiate that contract? What are we going to call it? Now let's communicate it to the authorities that know that we've created a new temporary contract. I'm in the process of scanning Nicholas Rescher's book, which I have read previously and am now rereading. Can you see that? Throw that up on the screen, Daniel.
The law of what?
The logic of commands. This is one of the things that Pask references the most. in throughout his work. There is something quite recent. I'm going to flip this around so don't get dizzy. eFlint, a domain-specific language for executable norm specifications. Thomas van Binsbergen in the Netherlands is one of the major people working on this initiative. And the Spatial Web Foundation and Verces and the IEEE working group that's working on setting up a standard for autonomous agents has several times mentioned eFlint as part of their eventual standard. And it looks pretty cool. It's got a fair amount of detail. I don't think it goes as deeply into commands as Rusher does. So that stuff needs to be consolidated. There you go. Good. And as Daniel mentioned, there was another very extensive framework, very powerful, called SUMO, S-U-M-O, that Adam Pease, P-E-A-S-E, is the leader of. And we have done some work to integrate the active inference on formal ontology into the SUMO pervasive formal ontology. And these more specialized command languages need to be developed in a great deal of detail. You just plain are not going to be able to fulfill the vision of mobile autonomy without a lot of work on formalizing commands and questions. The philosophers have done a splendid job of that, but for the most part, that's words on paper and needs to be turned into the capacity for formulating and exchanging and instantiating programs built on the fly in conformity with regulations and conventions. And I think the cybernetics people, active inference people, as well as the spatial web group and formal ontology, those all have resources that are required if that's to be done before we start getting serious mass accidents and possibly onerous overregulation because of that, like banning drones. Plenty of people would love to see drones banned. I'm not sure that's the way.
Yeah, so this is kind of a semi-related effort that's also just starting to I'm starting to formulate around developing concepts of social readiness level and nature readiness level to sort of augment existing concepts of technical readiness, manufacturing readiness, stuff like that. I'm involved with another working group, social systems at NCOSE. The lead of that working group is doing work on policy and games, sort of understanding like how to abstract and policy for modeling, and so that at the moment I'm sort of thinking of that as a separate discussion, but at some point these may very well come together at different levels of interaction with the tool in a sort of a modeling space. I think it does. It is very much an interdisciplinary effort, and I think the work there, the existing work, at least that I know of, is pretty thin, and definitely an area that that could be developed further. Our initial thoughts, as far as like in terms of discourse, is possibly like having different agents as sort of defined as personas, and as part of that, I think there would need to be some kind of meta level analysis of how that discourse proceeds in a in like a real project. I mean, with people involved. Yeah, so I think there's maybe some potential efforts around empirical research and model-based research. So this is sort of veering into the 10-year plan, and kind of developing a group to kind of build up this activity.
Though the full realization may be broader than a 10-year plan. I mean, from the compositional active inference, multi-agent, human and non-human ecosystems of shared intelligence setting, applying it to flexible agent-based and informational artifact-based ontologies, like those are already open source and there, and we use them productively, qualitatively, like every day in every project. I just use P3AF for every single process, perspective, property discussion as a sorting heuristic, just one of multiple. And like, even though research does proceed, the research is not the rate limiting step in terms of people's use on different projects. Not that future research won't help, but I don't know if another framework when we're the territory is the actual. So more mapping techniques and more intermapping fusion techniques are always going to either resample semantic spaces we already know about at finer or coarser detail, and or have an overlapping parallax perspective. However, I don't know or think it's possible to make another mapping technique shiny enough to be the one to rule them all, because we're already in the multi-mapping fusion space. And so that radically shifts the discussion to what people can do with their internal action, attention, and then with their external action, like their voice and their fingers, and getting going on the what can be done and what is our affordances right now is the broader conversation. Whereas like to continue from GRT into the more category theoretic space, also with language models, just putting in screenshots, just copying and pasting plain text in and saying, okay, now write category theory simulation for me and my real team. Here's our chat log. It gives category theory simulations of text. So capacity awareness is huge, but then just a few hours of playing around and it can be like, I mean, it's so much epistemic value. It makes the head spin, actually.
Well, yeah, so how could we engage that into, or kind of build that into this work process, work stream? Any thoughts?
I think having the 0th level be the archiving and the curation, indexing, library science. And so just first, curate and preserve the primary and the proximate and the actual. So just there's ethnographic type work to be done in working groups of literally just making sure that all the links and that the chats are saved, the videos are curated, just bringing the information together as a primary archival task, and not getting cart before the horse with the future of digital twins before, while there's so much information slipping between the fingers in real time. Then on that primary referenced archival material, making a plurality of assertions, none of which is the beginning and the end of the truth. They're all just map-based assertions. And then if you have one person who knows active inference a lot and one who knows cybernetics, let them both annotate, and then let someone co-annotate that new primary artifact. Or if one person knows both, then they can accelerate some of those ontology fusion efforts with respect to the primary reference artifact. So just separating out, I mean, unsurprisingly, the collections from the analysis and realizing that the sense-making process, though it's not just one recipe, it is something that, especially situationally, the patterns can just be described and then folded back in as part of explicit documentation, not needing a square zero for pattern languages every time, not needing a square zero when we already share so much context, especially for groups that are already in progress, and just knowing which implicit to make explicit, and then having clear communicable agendas that exist assertionally on top of primary artifacts, though they also become their own primary artifacts, like the kind of code and data dialectic. When is it being looked at as an inert object versus when is it being analyzed or used as an active object?
What you've described is a very, very articulate meta system. I'm just wondering, I mean, where does this apply? Does this apply to the work that this group does, or Randall does, or George does, or Douglas does, or I mean, you know, Dave does? I mean, or where that's what I'm. And that's you're writing up sort of or you're describing a general approach to all the criteria through which all this should be viewed.
So I've tried to capture that, you know, in a diagram, but
It's a lot.
yeah, it's a lot. And what I think what I'm thinking I would like to do is try to, well, just articulate that a little more, either diagrammatically or textually. And I don't know if you'd be willing to kind of sort of review that together, and then with the aim of maybe building this into the development of this tutorial, because you know really I think what we're trying to do is you know construct a foundation for a fairly specific kind of discourse process, and it might not, you know, be general enough yet for wider application, but it may be useful for towards that end.
Definitely.
I think a great project. I mean, all of these archival projects are immense fields. Also, George's GST SIG, because discourse analysis, I mean, just speculating here, like discourse analysis of two people talking about a grocery list, you know, maybe there'll be like deep truth drops about their worldviews. It's possible. But in discussion of frameworks, which is a special genre of speech act, it will be possible to make the quantum reference frame or the semantic frame comparisons. Like, you know, do you like this kind of food or that kind of food? It's like it's a sensory preference, or you know, all these again, there's a lot to that choice of foods. But if there's a conversation in one of the GST meetings and someone says like this, and coming from a place of being informed and understanding what the differences are, and someone says, here's where I'm seeing the overlap between these two. And then if we have a formal explicit understanding of like, here's the axioms and the consequences of GST-A and GST-B. So this is kind of like the Venn diagram on the plane. And then we have someone from the imaginary quantum perspectival direction giving how it seems to them as a valid epistemic assertion. And then if that does not do violence to the underlying actual formalisms. Like if someone just misunderstands a formalism, it's kind of like it's like a mulligan expression because actually they're just speaking from a prior that isn't the one that is the actual. But to the extent that what they describe in the actual is non-contradictory, then the perspectives taken upon that will be mega informative, and they'll immediately suggest the kinds of higher order cybernetic points there are. Like, are there only 2 or 3 levels of discourse? Once you've created the strange loop in the second or the third level, does that kind of tuck the Gordian knot in, or are there still further levels to go? And then you have the model that stops there, and then the model with multiple levels, and then you ask people how they feel about the difference between those two models. I think that's part of the socializing and the naturalizing of system science, not just the biomimicry and the materials and the algorithms and the bio-inspired, is the naturalization of the discourse itself in the conversation theoretic ecosystems of shared intelligence setting that we now already have. Well, any last thoughts? And then that's fun for today.
Well, only if there's some way to carry on some of this conversation between the meetings with Randall and Dave, and if George and you, Daniel, I'd be interested in that because it sort of impacts some of the other work I'm doing.
Yeah, what's the best? Like, I mean, I can just send an email thread with everyone right now.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Okay, let me just.
Yeah, and we'll see if we can coordinate something, because you're not going to talk about this again for 2 weeks, right? Or you're going to talk about it next week.
I mean, we're kind of
emerging.
Actually, I have it's next week, the 8th. Yeah. I have a meeting on, unfortunately conflicts with this one next week. Yeah, noon on Friday is just kind of a bad time for me. But at 10 a.m. Eastern, I've got a meeting of this tutorial group. I'd open it up to anybody from here who wants to attend. I'm not sure if, what value you get out of it, but I think the perspective would be, whatever perspective that could be brought would be appreciated, because I think this, just looking at the people I've got in the room, I'm probably the weak link when it comes to the kind of the AI part. I'm more like the design methodology guy, and I've done a little bit of work with like the discourse analysis, but enough to just be dangerous, I think.
Can you put your email, Randall, in the chat?
Sure.
And then I'll send this just from today. And I mean, it's recorded. It'll be available at the notes page in just a few minutes. I'll include those links. And then, I mean, that's the process. Have the quantum convo, and then manually and with increasingly automated systems, augmented discourse analysis.
Dave as well.
Repeat.
Yeah, can Dave? Have you got Dave's email contact?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you all. See you next time.
Thank you.
One more note. One of the individuals we should hook up in Pittsburgh is Jill Lane, L-E-H-M-A-N. She is a discourse analyst at CMU, and Paul Pangaro has worked with her and recommended specifically that we get her in on the project. The projects, I should say. There are many of them, increasingly many, perhaps.
Write it out, Dave. It was a little echoey, but write it out in the email that that I'll send in a couple minutes. Once I upload this recording, then I'll send it to you all. And we'll continue from there. So thank you.
Great.
Bye.